Hey, hold it right there. You can't be back here. This is a restricted dock.
I'm allowed to be here. What seems
People like authorized personnel. Who gave you permission?
You're making a mistake.
Last warning. Step back from the dock or you'll be detained. Show me proof of citizenship.
Permission? This dock is under my command.
Yeah, that's what they all say. I need proof now.
Harbor Bay Marina, on a Saturday afternoon, was postcard-perfect Southern California. The kind of scene where million-dollar yachts gleamed white against blue water, where the Pacific sparkled under afternoon sun, where the smell of salt air mixed with diesel, and the distant clang of halyards against masts. Commander Merrick Reed stood on Pier 7, inspecting a 42-foot sailboat flagged for safety violations, routine weekend duty for a U.S. Coast Guard sector commander. Still in his professional civilian attire from the morning's interagency briefing, navy blazer with Coast Guard pin, light blue dress shirt, khakis, deck shoes. His military credentials were aboard his inspection vessel tied up 20 feet away, his Coast Guard ID in his wallet, his federal commission giving him command authority over every inch of these waters. And he'd just finished documenting hull registration discrepancies when 3 ICE agents emerged from a dark government SUV parked near the marina entrance, moving with tactical aggression down the pier toward him. Their body cameras were rolling, recording what would become the most expensive dockside detention in federal history. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. And if you haven't already subscribed, please hit the subscribe button because, trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Agent Boyd Kincaid led the approach. His partners, Agents Sutton Whitaker and Gentry Gable, flanking wide like they were corralling a fugitive trying to escape by water. Reed saw them coming down the wooden pier, read the tactical spacing, the hands hovering near duty belts, the body language of men who'd already decided he was a problem. His commander's instincts, honed through 23 years of Coast Guard service, countless vessel boardings, hundreds of maritime law enforcement actions, cataloged it all in the second it took them to close the distance. Federal agents, immigration and customs enforcement patches visible on their tactical vests, looking at him like he was trespassing instead of the federal officer with superior jurisdiction over these waters, looking at the high-end marina and the black man in professional attire inspecting a yacht and deciding that combination couldn't possibly be legitimate. He knew where this was going before Kincaid opened his mouth. He'd heard stories about ICE conducting sweeps at waterfronts, about agents who didn't understand jurisdictional boundaries, about enforcement operations that ignored professional courtesy between federal agencies. He just never imagined it would happen to him. Not at Harbor Bay Marina, where his Coast Guard vessels were berthed. Not while conducting official safety inspections in his sector. Not when he literally held the federal commission that gave him command authority over the very waters these agents were standing beside. Sir, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We're conducting verification operations at this marina. Reed's hands stayed visible, one holding his inspection clipboard, the other at his side, despite every commander's instinct that wanted to reach for credentials and end this immediately. 23 years of military discipline had taught him that sudden movements around armed personnel could turn fatal. Around them, the marina bustled with Saturday afternoon activity. Tourists photographing sailboats, boat owners washing decks, marina staff assisting customers. And near the harbormaster's office, a weekend sailor named Ledger Stallard had his phone out, filming what appeared to be an unusual confrontation between a well-dressed professional and aggressive federal agents. The most expensive dockside detention in federal history was about to cost the government $13.2 million. And it hadn't even occurred to Agent Boyd Kincaid that the man he was about to arrest might actually be the Coast Guard commander with federal authority over the location where they stood. Might actually be the officer who could have them removed from his sector with a single radio call to his command center. "Say, I command this dock," Kincaid announced, with the confidence of someone who'd never encountered superior jurisdiction. "Show me proof of citizenship. Now!" Harbor Bay Marina existed in that perfect intersection of natural beauty and human achievement that defined Southern California's best waterfront properties. 300 slips accommodating vessels ranging from modest day sailors to million-dollar motor yachts. A championship-level sailing club. Waterfront restaurants where tourists and locals alike watch the sunset, paint the Pacific in shades of orange and gold. The kind of place that appeared in travel magazines and yacht club newsletters representing the aspirational lifestyle of coastal living. Saturday afternoon at 3:17 p.m. was peak activity time. Families returning from day sails, their children's faces sunburned and happy. On boat owners performing weekend maintenance, polishing brightwork, checking rigging, washing salt spray from decks. Marina staff helping customers navigate the complex dance of departures and arrivals. Tourists walking the public pier, photographing the boats, feeding seagulls despite the posted signs requesting they not. The air smelled like it should. Salt water, diesel from the fuel dock, the faint scent of fiberglass and marine paint. The sounds were equally characteristic, halyards clanging against aluminum masts, the low rumble of engines, the cry of gulls, conversations in multiple languages as the international sailing community went about its Saturday routine. Commander Merrick Reed stood on Pier 7, clipboard in hand, conducting the kind of routine safety inspection that was part of his duties as U.S. Coast Guard Sector Commander for the region. The 42-foot Catalina sailboat beside him, hull number partially obscured by improper registration stickers, represented a minor violation that would result in a warning and a 30-day compliance order. Standard enforcement action, the kind that protected mariners and maintained the integrity of federal maritime regulations. He was dressed in what he called his professional civilian uniform. Navy blazer with small Coast Guard pin on the lapel, light blue dress shirt, khakis pressed with military precision, deck shoes worn enough to show he actually spent time on boats. His Coast Guard credentials were aboard his official inspection vessel, a rigid hull inflatable marked with Coast Guard insignia, tied up at the adjacent slip. His military ID was in his wallet. His commission as Sector Commander, signed by the Commandant and the Secretary of Homeland Security, gave him federal law enforcement authority over every vessel, every dock, every inch of water visible from where he stood. 23 years of service, Annapolis graduate, multiple combat deployments, search and rescue operations that had saved hundreds of lives, drug interdiction missions that had seized millions in contraband. The kind of career that defined what it meant to serve with honor in the United States Coast Guard. He was making notes about the hull registration now when he noticed the dark Chevrolet Suburban pull into the marina parking lot with the kind of aggressive entry that suggested law enforcement rather than recreational boating. Government plates, tinted windows, the tactical configuration that meant federal agents. His commander's instincts activated immediately. Something about their approach felt wrong, felt targeted. The SUV didn't park in visitor spaces. It positioned near the pier entrance, blocking egress, the way you'd set up for a high-risk apprehension. 3 men emerged, ice tactical vests visible even from a distance, moving down Pier 7 with aggressive purpose. Not checking multiple boats, not coordinating with marina security, moving directly toward him with the kind of tactical spacing that meant they'd already identified a target. The most expensive dockside detention in federal history was about to begin, and Commander Merrick Reed, federal officer with jurisdiction over these waters, was about to experience what happened when badges met bias on the pier he commanded. As Reed's hands stayed visible on his clipboard, despite every commander's instinct that wanted to reach for his credentials and resolve this immediately. 23 years of military discipline had taught him that sudden movements around armed personnel could be misinterpreted. That protocol meant safety even when you had done nothing wrong and held superior authority. Agent Kincaid approached with his partners, spreading into tactical formation. Whitaker moving left toward the fuel dock, Gable shifting right toward the boat ramp. A perfect triangle that controlled the pier and eliminated escape routes. The same formation Reed had used during drug interdiction boardings, when approaching vessels suspected of smuggling, when the tactical situation required maximum control. They were using it on a Coast Guard commander conducting routine inspections on a public pier. "Sir, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We need to see identification and proof of citizenship." Kincaid's voice carried that bureaucratic authority that expected immediate compliance. Reed kept his tone professional, measured, the command voice he used when de-escalating situations at sea. "I'm Commander Merrick Reed, United States Coast Guard. I'm the sector commander for this region. I'm conducting official vessel safety inspections. My credentials are aboard my inspection vessel 20 feet from here." Kincaid's expression didn't soften. "I command this dock. You need to step away from that vessel and show me documentation." The statement hung in the salt air, absurd in its ignorance of federal jurisdiction. Reed felt the strategic silence of command settle over him. The same discipline that kept him calm during hurricanes, during rescue operations, during combat deployments when chaos required absolute composure. "Agent Kincaid." He read the name off the tactical vest, making sure the body camera caught it. "You don't command this dock. The United States Coast Guard has federal maritime jurisdiction over all navigable waters and adjacent facilities under 14 U.S.C. 89. I'm the sector commander. This is my area of operations. I need you to articulate the reasonable suspicion that justifies your approach. We're conducting immigration enforcement. You fit the description of individuals we're seeking? What description? A federal officer in professional attire conducting official inspections? Silence. And because the description was obvious to everyone on the pier. A black man near expensive boats, and 3 agents who'd decided that combination required investigation. Around them, the marina had slowed. Boat owners stopped their work, watching. Tourists paused their photographs. Marina staff emerged from the office, recognizing something wrong about federal agents confronting the Coast Guard commander, whose inspection vessel was clearly marked and berthed in plain sight. Ledger Stallard, a weekend sailor returning from a day sail, had his phone out now, recording the confrontation with the instincts of someone who recognized when documentation would be important. Reed looked at each agent, making sure their body cameras captured his professional demeanor, his visible credentials pin, to his clipboard with official Coast Guard inspection forms. I'm going to retrieve my military ID from my wallet. I'm moving slowly. Please don't mistake professional courtesy for evasion. Kincaid stepped closer, blocking his path. You don't move anywhere until we secure the situation. I command this dock, and you're being detained for verification. The jurisdictional collision was complete. An ICE agent claiming authority over a Coast Guard commander on federal maritime property. Ignorance compounded by arrogance. Bias masked as enforcement. Reed reached slowly for his wallet, movements deliberate and visible, despite the absurdity of a Coast Guard commander having to demonstrate non-threat on his own pier. He extracted his military ID card. Department of Defense issued, Coast Guard insignia clearly visible. To rank and commission status printed in official typeface. He held it out. Kincaid took it, examined it with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for suspected forgeries. Commander Merrick Reed, 05, United States Coast Guard. Active duty. Security clearance. Federal Law Enforcement Authority under Title 14. Reed kept his voice level, factual, the way he'd brief superior officers. That ID is issued by the Department of Defense. It's not fake. Call Coast Guard Sector Command. They'll verify my commission in under 1 minute. Kincaid barely glanced at the credentials before looking up with dismissive skepticism. This could be high-quality stationery. Anyone can print an ID card. The words hit like a rogue wave. Reed had carried those credentials for 23 years, had used them to board suspect vessels, to coordinate with foreign navies, to access military installations worldwide. And this agent was calling them fake stationery. That's a Department of Defense Common Access card. It has embedded chips, holographic security features, and biometric data. It's not stationery. It's a federal credential that grants access to classified military systems. We'll verify that after we process you. Call my command center. The number is on that card. Coast Guard Sector San Diego will confirm I'm Commander Reed, currently conducting weekend inspections at Harbor Bay Marina. Gable, positioned near the boat ramp, spoke up. Sir, if you're really a Coast Guard commander, you'll have additional documentation. Passport. Birth certificate. Naturalization papers. I don't carry my birth certificate when conducting vessel inspections, Agent. And I don't need naturalization papers because I was born at the Naval Academy Hospital in Annapolis, Maryland, 54 years ago. I'm a natural-born citizen who's served this country in uniform since I was 18. Reed pulled out his Coast Guard credentials case, leather, worn, containing his federal law enforcement commission, his official ID, his authorization to carry weapons, his military orders. This is my federal commission, signed by the Commandant of the Coast Guard and countersigned by the Secretary of Homeland Security. It grants me law enforcement authority over navigable waters and maritime facilities, which includes this marina. Kincaid pocketed the ID without looking at the commission. We'll verify everything downtown. No, you'll verify here on this pier, or you'll articulate probable cause for arrest. Because right now, you're violating the Fourth Amendment rights of a federal officer with superior jurisdiction. Whitaker stepped closer from the fuel dock side. Your attitude is suspicious. Your refusal to cooperate is suspicious. I've shown you federal credentials. I've given you verification information. I've explained my authority. What I'm refusing is unlawful detention on federal maritime property, where I have command jurisdiction. A voice from the growing crowd, an elderly man in a sailing club jacket, clearly a longtime Marina member, called out, "That's Commander Reed. His Coast Guard boat is right there." What are you people doing? Kincaid's face flushed. Everyone step back. This is a federal investigation. But phones were out now, multiple angles recording. Ledger Stallard had moved closer. It was his footage capturing the absurdity of ICE agents dismissing a Coast Guard commander's credentials on a pier where his official vessel sat in plain sight. Reed looked directly at Kincaid's body camera. I'm Commander Merrick Reed, U.S. Coast Guard, Federal Badge Number CG-8472. I'm being detained on federal maritime property where I have jurisdictional authority. This is unconstitutional, and every witness here is documenting it. If this story is resonating with you, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. Agent Kincaid, Reed's command voice carried across the pier with the authority developed through years of addressing crews in heavy seas and hostile situations. I'm going to explain this once for your body cameras and these witnesses. And the Fourth Amendment protects all persons, including Coast Guard commanders, from unreasonable searches and seizures. You're detaining me on federal maritime property without reasonable suspicion based on specific and articulable facts. That violates constitutional law and federal maritime jurisdiction. Kincaid stepped closer, attempting to use physical presence for intimidation. On a pier, where Reed held federal command authority. Sir, final warning. Furthermore, Reed continued, his military training overriding the humiliation of being treated like a criminal on his own pier. Under 14 U.S.C. 89, Coast Guard officers have federal law enforcement authority over vessels and waterfront facilities. I have jurisdictional priority here. You're conducting operations in my sector without coordination? See, without notification to Coast Guard Command, without legal justification. The pier had transformed into an outdoor tribunal, with Reed delivering what amounted to a legal brief for his own unlawful detention. Marina staff had gathered near the harbor master's office. Boat owners clustered on adjacent piers. Tourists watched with phones raised, documenting the confrontation. I'm invoking my Fourth Amendment rights. I do not consent to this detention. I do not consent to any search of my person or my inspection vessel. I am clearly stating for these cameras and witnesses that I am a United States citizen, a Coast Guard commander, and I'm being illegally detained on federal maritime property where I have command jurisdiction. Whitaker moved in from the left, handcuffs already visible. You're being detained for investigation. Such continued resistance will result in arrest. I'm not resisting. I'm asserting constitutional rights and explaining jurisdictional authority. Every military officer in this country knows the difference between asserting rights and obstructing justice. You're conflating them because you've profiled a black man on a dock and decided he must be illegal despite federal credentials. Gable grabbed Reed's left arm. Reed didn't fight. Violence on a public pier could endanger civilians, could escalate into deadly force. But he didn't assist either. His body went limp, forcing the agent to support his full weight. For the record, Reed's command voice remained steady despite physical restraint. It's 3:24 p.m. on Saturday, May 18th. I'm being physically detained at Harbor Bay Marina on Pier 7. I have not threatened anyone. I have not attempted to flee. I have not committed any crime. I identified myself as Coast Guard Sector Commander. I showed federal credentials. I offered immediate verification through my command center. I'm being arrested because 3 ICE agents decided a black man conducting vessel inspections must be suspicious. Voices erupted from the growing crowd. This is wrong. He's Coast Guard. His boat is right there. Someone call his command center. Ledger Stallard's voice carried clearly. I'm recording this. That's a Coast Guard commander. His inspection vessel is 20 feet away with Coast Guard insignia. This is unlawful detention. But Kincaid already had handcuffs out, and Reed knew, from his commander's training, from his experience with institutional failures, from his lived reality as a black officer, that his credentials, or his rank, his federal authority, none of it would protect him from agents who'd already decided who he was based on the color of his skin. The handcuffs closed around Reed's wrists, still holding the clipboard with Coast Guard inspection forms. Cold steel against skin that had gripped helm wheels in storms, had pulled drowning sailors from the sea, had saluted the flag for 23 years of honorable service. I'm not resisting, Reed announced with command clarity, his voice carrying to every witness, every recording device, every shocked marina patron. I'm submitting to unlawful detention. Every action from this point forward is being documented for the federal lawsuit I will file. Whitaker grabbed his right arm, Gable his left. They tried to walk him toward their SUV at the pier entrance, but Reed let his body go completely limp. A dead weight. All 195 pounds of a Coast Guard commander became a burden they had to drag across the wooden pier. Move! Walk! No. I'm being unlawfully arrested on federal maritime property where I have jurisdictional authority. I will not assist in this constitutional violation. You want to detain a Coast Guard commander on his own pier, you're going to drag me in front of all these witnesses. It was passive resistance, calculated and deliberate. The same technique he'd studied in leadership courses, had seen in civil rights documentation, had never imagined deploying in uniformed service on a public pier. They dragged him past his own inspection vessel. The rigid hull inflatable with Coast Guard clearly marked on the hull, official numbers visible, a federal law enforcement authority literally floating 20 feet from where they detained him. Past Marina staff who knew exactly who he was. Past his sector command vehicle parked in the official slipholder's lot. I'm being dragged across Harbor Bay Marina at 3:26 p.m., Reed narrated for the cameras, his command voice unwavering. My shoulder is being wrenched. The handcuffs are cutting circulation. Excessive force applied to a non-resistant federal officer conducting official duties. Marina Director Patricia Chen's voice cut through, sharp with professional outrage. That's Commander Reed! He's Coast Guard! His vessel is right there! What, this is federal maritime property. You're violating jurisdictional protocol. Other voices joined. Someone call the Coast Guard. This is illegal detention. He's a federal officer. Why won't you just look at his boat? But the agents kept dragging him, past the fuel dock, past the sailing club, toward their SUV. Reed's deck shoes scraped against weathered wood, his blazer riding up, his professional appearance dissolving into the indignity of being hauled like cargo on the pier he commanded. They reached the parking lot. Kincaid opened the rear door. Prisoner transport configuration, steel mesh partition, the cage where they put people they'd decided were criminals. Watch your head. Gable shoved him inside without care for the shoulder already strained. Reed couldn't catch himself with hands cuffed, hit the vinyl seat hard. His head striking the partition with force that opened a cut above his eye. Blood. Warm and metallic, trickling down his temple. More evidence of excessive force applied to a non-resistant officer. He sat up awkwardly, hands still bound, blood on his face, and looked through the partition at the marina, his sector, his jurisdiction, his area of responsibility. Could see his Coast Guard vessel floating in its slip. Could see the crowd of witnesses, phones raised. Could see Ledger Stallard still recording every moment. It's 3:28 p.m. I'm Commander Merrick Reed, U.S. Coast Guard, Federal Badge CG 8472. I've been unlawfully arrested on federal maritime property, assaulted during detention, and am being transported against my will. I want every badge number, every name. Every frame of footage preserved for the federal lawsuit that will cost you everything. The door slammed, cutting him off from the marina, from his command, from the waters he'd sworn to protect. But not from justice. Never from justice. The federal detention facility holding cell was 10 feet by 10 feet of windowless concrete. Nothing like the bridge of a cutter. Nothing like the open ocean where Reed had spent his career. Institutional beige walls, metal bench bolted to the floor, a door with a small observation window, fluorescent lights humming with the frequency of bureaucratic indifference. This was the machinery of detention. The processing center where federal officers became case numbers, where command authority dissolved into paperwork, where badges meant nothing if the people holding them had already decided who you were. They'd stripped him of his blazer during intake, his Coast Guard pin, his belt, his wallet with military ID, his clipboard with official inspection forms, everything that marked him as a federal officer cataloged as personal effects and locked away. But they couldn't strip away his training. Reed sat on the metal bench, back straight despite the circumstances, hands folded despite the red marks from handcuffs. Not in despair. In strategic assessment. The same mental discipline that kept him calm during hurricanes, during rescue operations in heavy seas, during combat situations when panic could kill. He had no watch. That was in the evidence locker too, but his internal clock, calibrated through years of standing watch, told him approximately 90 minutes had passed. 90 minutes since the pier. 90 minutes since 3 agents had violated federal maritime jurisdiction to arrest a Coast Guard commander conducting routine inspections. His commander's training took over. Assess. Document. Prepare. Mental inventory of violations. Fourth Amendment. Unlawful detention without probable cause. Violation of federal maritime jurisdiction under 14 U.S.C. 89. Excessive force during arrest. Destruction of federal property when they damaged his inspection clipboard. Interference with official Coast Guard duties. Evidence already secured. Body camera footage from all 3 agents showing the entire confrontation. Ledger Stallard's civilian recording. Marina surveillance cameras covering the pier. Witness statements from marina staff, boat owners, tourists. His Coast Guard inspection vessel sitting in plain sight with federal insignia. And his military ID showing his rank and commission. The inspection forms documenting his official duties. The Coast Guard sector command logs showing he was assigned to weekend inspections at Harbor Bay Marina. Count 1. False arrest. Detained without probable cause, without reasonable suspicion, based solely on racial profiling at a waterfront facility. Count 2. Violation of federal maritime jurisdiction. ICE agents conducting operations in Coast Guard jurisdiction without coordination or legal authority. Count 3. Excessive force. Physical assault during detention of a non-resistant federal officer. Count 4. Violation of military officer rights. Detention of active duty commissioned officer performing official duties. He thought about his crew, junior officers who looked up to him, enlisted personnel he'd mentored, so the Coast Guard community that would hear about this. He thought about the vessels in his sector, the operations that would continue without him, the weekend inspections now disrupted by agents who'd seen a black man in a blazer and assumed criminality. The door's observation window darkened periodically, guards checking, ensuring he wasn't a threat. Each time, Reed maintained his posture. Straight back. Calm expression. The bearing of a commander who'd weathered worse storms than this. 3 hours, he calculated. They'd hold him 3 hours before someone at Coast Guard Command noticed their sector commander hadn't checked in, before the marina called asking questions, before the viral video forced their hand. He used the time like he'd use any watch, productively, strategically, preparing for what came next. When this was over, the lawsuit would be devastating. The jurisdictional violations would trigger interagency reviews. The video would become training material on what not to do. Commander Merrick Reed settled in to wait, to document mentally, and to plan the legal reckoning that would cost them $13.2 million. Harlan Beller had supervised ICE field operations for 16 years, long enough to recognize when a situation had escalated from mistake into career-ending catastrophe. The call from Coast Guard Sector Command at 6:34 p.m., 3 hours after the marina detention, triggered every alarm in his system. Supervisor Beller, this is Captain Morrison, Coast Guard Sector, San Diego. Where is Commander Merrick Reed? He missed his scheduled check-in. His inspection vessel is still at Harbor Bay Marina. And we're receiving reports of ICE agents detaining someone matching his description. Beller's world tilted. Commander? Coast Guard Commander? Your agents arrested the sector commander at a marina while he was conducting official vessel inspections in his uniform blazer with his Coast Guard vessel in plain sight. We have viral video of the arrest. Where is he? I'll locate him immediately. You'll locate him now. We have a flag officer demanding answers. The commandant's office is involved, and if Commander Reed has been harmed, this becomes an interagency incident that will destroy careers. Beller pulled up the afternoon's detention log with hands that shook. Waterfront enforcement action authorized by Agent Boyd Kincaid. Suspect detained for immigration verification at Harbor Bay Marina. 1 detention. Unidentified male. I refuse to provide documentation beyond suspected fraudulent military, AWD, transported for processing. Oh, God. Not just a commander. The sector commander. Federal officer with maritime jurisdiction. Arrested on his own pier while performing official duties. He was running before conscious thought caught up. Down corridors, through security, into the holding area. The intake officer looked up, immediately reading disaster in Beller's expression. The subject from the marina detention. Where is he? Cell 4. Military ID appears genuine upon closer examination. We've been waiting for verification protocols. Show me his intake photo. Now. The screen displayed a man in a navy blazer, professional attire disheveled, head wound bleeding, expression of controlled fury that somehow radiated more authority than the agents who'd arrested him. And, unmistakably, Commander Merrick Reed. whose face Beller recognized from interagency coordination meetings. They'd arrested a Coast Guard sector commander at a marina while he conducted official inspections, with his federal vessel visible 20 feet away. Beller grabbed the evidence locker items: military ID, Coast Guard credentials, inspection clipboard, wallet showing Federal Law Enforcement Commission, phone with 73 missed calls from numbers labeled CG Sector Command, CG District, Marina Director. He ran to cell 4. Through the window, Reed sat with military bearing despite 3 hours of detention, back straight, hands folded, looking like a commander waiting out a storm. Beller opened the door. Reed looked up, unsurprised, assessing. "Commander Reed, I'm Supervisor Harlan Beller. There's been a catastrophic error. I sincerely apologize." "Save it." Reed stood slowly, every inch of military authority evident despite confinement. "I don't want apologies. I want documentation of every moment of my detention. Every agent's name and badge number, every frame of body camera footage, the marina surveillance, the civilian recordings, all of it preserved as evidence." Beller felt his career dissolving in real time. "Commander, we'll cooperate fully." "You'll cooperate because I'm demanding it as a federal officer who's been illegally detained. Your agents violated federal maritime jurisdiction. They arrested a commissioned officer performing official duties. They ignored credentials, refused verification, and assaulted me during detention. And this isn't cooperation. This is mandatory evidence preservation for the lawsuit that will end careers. We can resolve this through interagency channels. No, we'll resolve this in federal court. I'm filing a civil rights lawsuit. I'm filing formal complaints with the Coast Guard Inspector General. I'm requesting a Department of Homeland Security investigation into your field office's systematic failures. And I'm ensuring every service member knows what happened when your agents profiled a commander." Reed walked past him, posture military straight despite 3 hours of detention. "My personal effects. Transportation back to Harbor Bay Marina, where my vessel is still berthed. And immediate notification to Coast Guard Sector Command explaining why their commander was illegally detained for 3 hours." Beller watched his career end in real time as Reed collected his belongings and walked out with the bearing of an officer who just survived an engagement and was preparing to win the war. The trial began 19 months later in federal district court. Attorney Blythe Thorne, a formidable civil rights specialist, stood before the jury and delivered an opening statement that combined legal precision with moral clarity. "Ladies and gentlemen, Commander Merrick Reed was doing his job. He's a 23-year Coast Guard veteran. He was conducting routine vessel safety inspections at a marina in his sector. And 3 ICE agents decided he looked suspicious. Not because he'd committed a crime, and not because they had evidence, but because they saw a black man in professional attire near expensive boats and assumed he didn't belong there, despite federal credentials, despite his Coast Guard vessel in plain sight, despite his jurisdictional authority." She clicked a remote. The monitors showed body camera footage from Kincaid's perspective. Timestamp 3:17:42 p.m. "Watch. You'll see Commander Reed in his uniform blazer with Coast Guard pin, holding official inspection forms. Professional, authorized. Now watch the agents approach with tactical formation, the same formation used for high-risk arrests." The footage showed the confrontation, the dismissal of credentials, the escalation, Reed identifying himself repeatedly, offering verification through Coast Guard Command, citing federal maritime jurisdiction while Kincaid claimed to command this dock. 7 jurors took notes. Others watched with expressions of disbelief. The audio came next, Kincaid's body camera recording his conversation with partners during the arrest. "I don't care what that badge says. He doesn't look like any commander I've ever seen. Probably bought it online. We're doing the right thing." The courtroom went silent. The jury heard the explicit bias, an agent admitting he didn't believe Reed's credentials based on appearance, not evidence. The civilian footage followed, Ledger Stallard's recording showing the full scene. Reed's Coast Guard vessel clearly visible with federal insignia. Marina staff protesting. Reed being dragged across the pier while citing constitutional law. Blood on his face from the transport van. The 5 jurors were visibly upset. The defense tried damage control, protocols, training. The agents believed the credentials might be fraudulent. Brief detention, only 3 hours, and Reed's release without charges. Then Thorne called Supervisor Beller to the stand. "Supervisor, your agents testified they followed protocols. What protocol allows ignoring a Coast Guard vessel with federal insignia sitting 20 feet from where you arrest someone claiming to be Coast Guard? The agents. They didn't verify. Commander Reed gave them his command center's phone number. Did they call it? No. Why not? They intended to verify after transport. After illegally detaining a federal officer? Commander Reed had jurisdictional authority over that marina. Your agents were operating in Coast Guard waters without coordination. Yet they violated federal maritime law and constitutional rights. Isn't that the truth? Beller had no answer. The jury watched him fail to justify the unjustifiable. The real truth, Supervisor, is your agents saw a black man in a blazer and decided he was criminal. They profiled a Coast Guard commander on his own pier. Then they doubled down rather than admit their mistake. Deliberation. 14 hours. Verdict, unanimous. Constitutional violations, federal maritime jurisdiction violations, false arrest, excessive force, interference with military duties. Damages, $13.2 million. The courtroom erupted. Reed sat quietly, thinking about junior officers who'd face similar profiling, about the systemic changes this verdict would force, about justice finally matching authority. The settlement arrived 18 weeks later, on $13.2 million after legal fees, resources that could transform maritime civil rights advocacy. Reed returned to Coast Guard duty immediately, back in uniform, back commanding his sector. His crew gave him a standing ovation that lasted 10 minutes when he walked into the operations center, but everything had changed. Agents Kincaid, Whitaker, and Gable resigned before formal discipline hearings. Supervisor Beller took early retirement. The entire field office underwent restructuring. The Department of Homeland Security announced sweeping reforms. No enforcement operations in Coast Guard jurisdiction without coordination, mandatory recognition of military credentials, interagency protocol training, quarterly reviews. The Reed case became the textbook example studied at every federal law enforcement academy. But Reed knew policy changes weren't enough. Real change required protecting those without his rank. He created the Maritime Justice Initiative with $11 million of his settlement. The nonprofit provided free legal representation to minority service members and maritime workers targeted by profiling. It trained agencies on recognizing jurisdictional authority. It tracked patterns and brought lawsuits, relentlessly, against systematic bias. First year, 847 clients represented, 612 cases won, $19.4 million in additional settlements funding expansion. 21 attorneys grew to 47, 7 offices to 29, regional impact to national influence. Commander Merrick Reed stayed in the Coast Guard, promoted to captain, then to rear admiral. But he changed how he led. Every officer he mentored, every sailor he trained, and he remembered cell 4 and 3 hours stolen for commanding while black. 10 years after the pier, Admiral Reed commanded the entire Pacific area, overseeing operations from Alaska to South America. His arrest had become Supreme Court precedent on federal jurisdictional violations and racial profiling. Harbor Bay Marina had renamed Pier 7 Commander's Pier with a permanent memorial. On each anniversary, Reed returned to the marina, standing where he'd been detained. The Maritime Justice Initiative hosted legal clinics, interagency training, community outreach. The memorial plaque read, "On this pier, Commander Merrick Reed defended constitutional rights and federal jurisdiction. His courage changed law enforcement policy nationwide." Progress wasn't one dramatic verdict. What it was making it possible for the next black officer to serve without agents deciding they looked too suspicious to be in command. That day hadn't fully arrived. But because of what happened on that pier, because of the $13.2 million judgment, because of the initiative and thousands of cases it supported, that day was closer than before. Commander, now Admiral, Merrick Reed had paid the price for systemic bias. He was making sure the system paid everything. One lawsuit, one protected sailor, one defended jurisdiction at a time. His favorite quote from Admiral Grace Hopper guided his work. "You manage things, you lead people." He'd proven that leadership meant protecting your people from the system that claimed to serve them. The Coast Guard motto was Semper Paratus, always ready. Reed had been ready that day on the pier, ready to assert his rights, ready to document violations, ready to fight for justice. And he'd won. Not just for himself, but for every service member who'd come after him. sailing into clearer skies because one commander refused to let badges trump the Constitution he'd sworn to defend.